Hey everybody, and welcome to Hell is for Children. This show is on every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 2100 hours Central European Time. My name is Geerte Frenken, and this show is all about the topic of protective mothers and their children. So what's a protective mother? A protective mother tries to protect her child or children from their abusive fathers by many means necessary, which is an uphill battle in today's global corrupt family court system that thrives on paternal entitlements. Today's guest is protective mother and child advocate Maralee McLean, who lost custody of her 4-year-old daughter to her abusive ex, despite reported medical evidence of sexual abuse and police reports stating abuse. She finally got her daughter back at age 12 after 8 years of 1 hour a week supervised visitations and endless litigation. Maralee is the author of Prosecuted but Not Silenced, Court Reform for Sexually Abused Children. And I'm very honored to have her on as a guest today. So welcome to Hell is for Children, Maralee.
Thanks, Geerte, and thanks for having me on. It's my privilege to be here. I'm very happy to be on your show.
Well, thanks for joining me today. Can you share with the audience what happened to you and your daughter?
Well, I'd first like to explain that I want the audience to know, for those of you listening that do not understand these type of cases, but there are thousands of them. And there are mothers from every state in the nation, the U.S. and internationally, that are going through the same thing that I went through over 25 years ago, trying to protect my daughter from sexual abuse in our court system and unable to do so. It's horrendous how much this goes on. I get calls every day from women all across the country, as I said, and I testified before Congress, and I lobbied, and I did everything in my power to protect my own daughter and was unable to do so. So I can start with my story if you like, and I just want to get it out there that this is not a one-time issue. This is rampant, and we have 58,000 children a year that are forced to go live with their abuser. I see women are going to jail. They're being gagged. They're running in the underground and not making it. Their children are being taken away by our court system, the very system that is supposed to protect our children. And I kind of find it interesting that as a whole, we get upset about Sandusky, which was a horrible deal here in the U.S., and the Catholic priest, and they put the spotlight on the Catholic priest, but the media needs to cover these stories, because this is the biggest crime of all, is our court system not protecting our children and our women, and most of these women have been through domestic violence too. So my story begins many years ago, like I said, about 25 years ago, before you heard about sexual abuse the way you do on TV today, or before you were even aware that this kind of thing went on. And I had full custody of my daughter, so this was not a custody issue. I had full custody of her. He had very limited visitation. And on a visit one day with her father, I took her, and she was darling, had her dressed up. She had eyes that danced and just long dark hair and just Miss Personality, and very, very advanced for a young age, very articulate. And dropped her off at her dad's, and I went to pick her up that evening, and I noticed that he didn't answer the door, and I kept knocking, and I'm thinking, where is he? And then he came to the door, and all her clothes are strewn all over the floor, and he brings her down wet, nude, and limp in his arms, and I'm thinking, what the heck happened to her? I thought she got sick. And a few minutes, I get her stuff together and get her out of there, and then things are coming out at the daycare provider. So he had this smirk on his face of like O.J. Simpson, like, I just raped your child and you don't even get it. And I didn't. That just did not cross my mind. I just thought she got really, really sick. So time went on. The daycare provider brought it to my attention, and my daughter disclosed at the age of 2.5. And social services gets involved, and this is really where my nightmare begins. And I am taking her to visitations with the father at social services, and most of these men are very manipulative, controlling, I'd say narcissists, sociopaths, psychopathic behaviors, but he was very intelligent and educated, so he didn't fit the pattern back then that people wanted to believe that it was the boogeyman around the corner. And I was watching him with my daughter through a window at social services thinking, oh my God, I'm in for it. Well, within a few weeks of that point, Well, I'm taking her to therapy, and the therapist has told me, yes, your daughter's being abused, sexually abused. I'm met by a GAL. Now, in this time period, I didn't know what even a GAL was. And the guardian ad litem says to me, I want to discuss 4 things with you. And she took me into a room, in a conference room, and social service people were there. And she interrogated me for a solid hour and a half, like I've never seen anything on TV. Why would your daughter continue to say this if you weren't coaching her? Because maybe it's going on. And then I'm going to have you do a psychological evaluation. I'm going to have him do it. I'm like, good, maybe we'll get to the bottom of this. And she points her finger in my face and she says, and maybe we'll find out about you. And then she says, this is parental alienation. And she wanted me to go through separation counseling with him. I'd been divorced from him for 2 years. He had stalked me. He had abused me. I was in a domestic violence relationship, which most of these cases are. And you know, that none of that seemed to matter. But I didn't even tell her that. I was just parental alienation. I'd never heard the term before. And syndrome is what she was using. And I said, parental alienation. I said, I had a great relationship with my own father, and I wanted her to have a chance to have the same. And she said, this child's going into foster care. She had a foster care home lined up before I even walked in that morning.
Wow.
And no grounds to take her out of my home. You know, we're divorced. I have full custody. He's abusing her. And you're going to pull this little girl out of the only safe environment she has. So I walked into another room, and I knew I had to hold it together, because if I showed any heavy-duty emotion or wanted to scream the way I really wanted to scream, they would have probably said, look at her, she's inept, the mother's inept, we've got to take this child from her. So I held it together, but I laid my head down on a desk and I was crying like as if I died. And one of the social workers comes up and taps me on the shoulder real coldly and says, you can go say goodbye to your daughter now. And I could not even walk. My legs were like, I was a gray mist around me. I know I was in shock. And they go, look at her. She can't handle it. She can't say goodbye to her daughter. And I said, oh, yes, I can. And I wanted to make sure I said goodbye to my baby. And I walked down the hallway, and they start coming towards me. I just kind of put my arm out the side, and I said, yes, I can. And I went in and told her I had to go to work. And she knew I wasn't going to work that day. And we were planning on going roller skating. So I drove 100 miles an hour to Dr. Baker's office, who was a psychologist at that time. And I got there, you know, I was a mess. And I said, you know the truth. You fight for us. And she said, my God, I had an idea they were going to do something like this. And I told them, absolutely not. So my little girl's placed into foster care and totally traumatized, and not knowing where she is, and not such a good home. And they move her to another home. And I get to see her 1 hour a week. And he gets to see her 1 hour a week. But she doesn't understand. She spent most of her time with me, and I'm not taking her home. She had very limited visitation. And more evidence is coming out on the abuse. The foster care parent states that she's screaming in the night, which I had gone through for 3 months previously, where she would be screaming out in the night, no, Daddy, don't, owie, owie, it's bad. And 5 and 6 times a night, arching her bed off the bed and in pain. And more detailed stuff was coming out. And yet this daycare provider, or actually was the foster care parent, she just said, I can't handle this. She was exhausted because she'd up with her every night. So they are going to put her in another home. And she says, you do that to this baby and you'll kill her. She needs her mom. And my daughter had displayed behavioral sexual abuse behaviors with other little kids in the daycare. So lots was coming out. They decided to put her back in my home. Now, this is this thing I want all people to know, and all women to know, mothers that are going through this. It's a catch-22, because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. They put her back in my home, but I'm not allowed to bring up the abuse again or say anything about the abuse. And that same GAL and social services went in to give him more time. While I'm dealing with the abuse and what she's going through, they're fighting to give him more time with her. So I'm constantly going back to court. I was not in court for 1 week, 1 day, 3 days. I was in court for 8 years, and I was in court for weeks at a time, and literally weeks. So I am fighting what they're trying to do. They're pushing it to get more and more time with him. It was the weird part about all of this is the more evidence that came out on abuse, the more time she got with her father. The more proof that the abuse was going on, the more time she got with her father. And so she didn't understand why nobody was protecting her. And at one point, I go to court, and this is one of the first hearings, and it was on custody. Well, this wasn't a custody issue. It didn't have anything to do with custody. This has to do with your child being abused. These cases don't belong in family court. If you or I were raped, Geerte, raped, it would be a criminal offense. When our children are being raped, it goes into family court. Well, who more likely to abuse children? They know the stats. The stats are, it's not the boogeyman. It's more family, in the family. And so you could easily, put it into a criminal court. Maybe you won't be able to prosecute because you don't have the evidence, but in my case, they did have the evidence and they still didn't prosecute. And a lot of these cases, they may not have the evidence, but there's got to be a way to protect these children and look at safety first versus handing them over to an abuser. So I go to trial, and the best interest of the child, of course, use this statute, and the best interest of the child who's able to nurture the relationship with the parent and child. So if the father's more able to nurture the relationship with the mother and child, then they're going to award the custody to the father. Of course, that mother is not going to be able to nurture that relationship because she's trying to protect her child. So in the best interest of the child, the judge, even though there was evidence of abuse, gave him custody. And I ended up with 50-50 time. That moved from 50-50 to completely losing all my visitation because more evidence was coming out on abuse. I hired 2 new attorneys to appeal everything that happened. And at that point, when I saw how crazy the system was and nothing was going right, I stopped at nothing. I turned over every rock. And back then, we didn't have the internet like the mothers do today. So they're all going together and fighting, and they're filing motions. And there's, a lot of them are going pro se because they have no money, like I ended up having to do. So that network that's going on is incredible. And that's the powerful tool that we have, is to keep that network going. But I believe these women have to keep going and never, ever give up. And I would say that's what I did. I decided that systems failing and failing miserably. That's when I started writing my book when my daughter was 2.5. I didn't think I'd make it through it because most of these cases, like I said, have domestic violence. I was living in fear for my life. I didn't know whether I'd make it through it, and a lot of us don't. And so I wanted my daughter to know the truth, what had happened. So that's why I started writing the book. The book is an educational tool for judges, lawyers, social workers, anybody involved in this kind of an issue, because I documented everything. So it's a case study. So it's to help all these mothers out there, because you got the case study, but then it has the research and the legal behind it.
I'll share the screen. Hold on.
Okay.
Here we go. This is the book, Prosecuted But Not Silenced, Court Reform for Sexually Abused Children, just so people can find it on Amazon.
Yeah, and I'm finding that the book is really helping. What I use it for is a tool to help other moms going through this. First of all, it helps them know what they're getting into and what can happen. I've got the research and the legal in there to show what happens. So it's an educational tool for their attorney to use when he's up against the system and doesn't know how this is happening or why this is happening. I've written lots of articles. This one's American Bar Association Law Journal article, and this is my way of an interview showing how this is happening and what we need to do and how we can change the system and make it better. But there's a lot of work to be done. And I really believe our main goal here is to get the media, mainstream media, to pick this up and run with it, because there's too many of these cases going on. So back to why, when I realized I'd lost that hearing and I was devastated, I ended up lobbying in Washington, D.C. I started lobbying when I went to the governor of Colorado. I never stopped trying to find somebody to help. And at that point, they continued, I had to wait for hearings or whatnot, and they continued to give her more and more time. I kept getting hearings by the GAL filing for more time. And they were using parental alienation syndrome, which is Richard Gardner's theory. And for those of you that don't know about Richard Gardner, this started in the 80s. And he self-published his books, and he sent them to every court in the nation. And he states in his own book, it's okay for the pedophile to come out of the closet and choose whom they want to love. It's God's will. And that
he was a pro-pedophile. He was a pedophile agenda promoter, basically.
Yeah, and he states that it makes little girls and little boys better sexual partners, and that we need to have more pity for the pedophile than scorn. And what's amazing is I saw the GAL passing that book under the table at one of our, I don't know, some kind of a briefing or something. A motion was being filed. And I happened just to be in a bookstore and saw the cover and took it home. And had I not taken that book home, I wouldn't have known what they were doing, because I was blindsided. Today, women know they're using PAS. It's not approved by the AMA or the APA, American Medical Association, or the American Psychological Association. However, these courts are still using his theories, and it's sick. I mean, the man stabbed himself 7 or 8 times in the upper part of his chest. I mean, he was not somebody that was together, and his theories should not be upholding in the courts still.
Yeah, he committed suicide, correct?
Right. Stabbed himself 7 or 8 times, yeah.
Yeah.
So I find it amazing that that's still being used, PAS, but in my book, why it's good for attorneys and these moms to use this is because I actually have where the GAL wrote checks to Gardner and paid Gardner in my case. And in one of the judge's orders that's in there, it states that I have PAS, and they mentioned Richard Gardner, and they mentioned Underwager and Wakefield from back then, who were with the Padica brief, who are very much followers. All 3 of those people stuck together on PAS, and I'd say promoting abuse of children is what they were doing. So at that point, I have 2 new attorneys to appeal everything, and then they bring in a couple of therapists to do an evaluation. And left out, at this point, my daughter has 3 police reports and 3 doctor's reports stating she's being abused. And I mean, these are heavy-duty reports, not minor stuff. It was at one point, I didn't know what to do because she was in so much pain and she was complaining so much. And what I did is I put a voice-activated tape recorder by her bed at night because she was screaming out in the night so much, and nobody believed me. And I begged social services, dear God, come live with me for a night and just witness what my child's going through. And they wouldn't do that, of course, but I have a lot on tape. And so with all the tape recordings and everything that was happening, I couldn't understand why they weren't protecting her. And the more evidence, like I told you, now you've got 3 police reports, 3 doctor's reports. They tell me to take her to Humana Hospital to an emergency room the next time she complains. And I have new attorneys, and they said, Maralee, you can't ignore it. It's a health reason. You have to take your child. You're legally responsible to. So I take her, but I tell moms this, I think it's really important, is that when you take your child to an evaluation, when they're young like that, do not answer any questions. Do not answer when they say, what's going on with your daughter? Say, talk to my daughter. Because if you say one word, they'll say the mother said. Mm-hmm. So everything they addressed, I said, talk to my daughter, talk to her, ask her. And finally the nurse said, are you not her mother? I said, of course I'm her mother, just talk to my daughter. So nothing was ever on record that it was coming from me. The other thing I think is really important to do with your children is that my daughter never stopped talking, and I think the reason why she didn't is because I listened, but I never added to what she was saying because I didn't want anything being mixed up in it. So keep your mouth out of it and let your child talk, listen, let them know you're fighting to help them, but don't add anything, don't ask any questions, just listen. And I think that's the most important thing you can do. She continued to talk forever, for this whole time. And then when I take her to Humana Hospital at that point, there is physical evidence. And I think she says, Mommy, has it stopped? And I regret to this day ever telling her, I still can cry over it, that I stopped it because I never did. And she thought she was going to be saved and protected at that time, and she wasn't. Within 2 days, she was returned to her father. And I went through hundreds of thousands of dollars in court costs, legal costs, fighting in every direction I could fight. And that's when I had been in the airline industry, and I was in management, and I went back to flying as a flight attendant to free up my time so I could fight. And I would fly to Washington, D.C., lobby all day, and then come back, and I'd lobby all day, so I'd, have a suit on, go lobby, and I worked with a law firm in Washington, D.C. that set my appointments up on the Hill. And then I'd fly back, and on one occasion, I just wanted to give this to you, how corrupt this is and how they have ex parte emergency hearings all the time in these cases. Every mom's case I look at, there's ex parte hearings going on. So I'm coming back from lobbying, and I'm doing everything quietly under the ropes. I'm not doing it in Denver, Colorado, where I live. I'm doing it outside of my state because I've already hit my state with everything I can and governing everybody to get help, and I'm not getting it. So I'm going outside. I'm going to the top. And at this point, I come back and I called my attorneys, and I wanted to know what was going on with my case or whatever. And they said, the paralegal says, Maralee, there's an emergency hearing in your case right now. And I said, I said, what? What do you mean? She said, there's an emergency hearing to take your daughter away from you. I said, you tell my attorneys not to take that phone call. It's the judge. They have to. You tell my attorneys not to take that call. I'm not even present. I'm not even in the state. How can they do this? Maralee, it's a judge. They've got to take the call. I knew I lost my daughter that moment. And I hung up the phone. And literally, when those engines roared at that airplane on my way home, I went into the bathroom and I roared the whole way home because I knew I'd lost my baby. And I just didn't think the system, with all the evidence I had and all the proof that she was being abused, and I mean detailed information, and top doctors in the state of Colorado from the Child Advocacy and Protection Team, Children's Hospital, stated my child was being abused. I didn't think the system could ignore. And what's amazing is people will say, oh, that was just that one judge. You just had a bad case. Well, I had 7 judges. It wasn't one judge. There's 7 judges in my case, and all 7 of them rubber stamped what the other one was doing. They would say this was not a sexual assault case or sexual abuse case, but in those days we had files, and every one of my files, which I had 40 to 80 legal boxes, 40 at home, but every one of them had red big letters stamped on the outside, sexual assault case, sexual assault case. And on one point, when I lost my daughter and I knew I had lost her, then it was Katie bar the door for me. And I say that to moms. If you're losing your child, I hate to tell you this, if you've lost, really lost, and you've gone through the system and you've done everything right and you have nothing against you and nothing on you, which most of these moms are healthy, good, loving mothers. When I testified before Congress during this time, I testified with 10 other mothers from across the nation with identical cases to mine. It could have been me speaking. And I came home and I vowed never, ever, ever to stop fighting for every mother out there and every child out there going through this. Anyway, so the bottom line is, I lost my track there, but I testified before Congress, and then I came back home, and I'm working the system as much as I can. And I have another hearing that I did go to the media. This is after I lost. And the media is really strong in my case. They did incredible coverage right here in Colorado. I mean, days and weeks at a time where you didn't hear this stuff. My case was covered, and very thoroughly and really well done. And still, I couldn't get her home. And they decided that when I went in for this hearing, another emergency hearing that I didn't even know what's happening, I go to this hearing, and I was normally in the courtroom, which most of these mothers are, by yourself. You're on one side of the courtroom, and everybody else is on the other side, and you're up against the whole system. And you're dealing with somebody, not only is that father probably somebody that's a sociopath or a psychopath or a narcissist or being able to work, you're up against a system that's up against you anyway. So you're fighting everybody. And I remember they called a hearing, and I go in, and I never could have my family there or anybody in there with me. I was isolated. So you're kind of, you're by yourself, and they're all on one side. And at this point, it wasn't on the sexual abuse. It was on because I had media coverage, and they were upset about the media coverage, and I had a gag order. So they gag these moms and jail these moms, and I go in for this hearing, and I'm thinking maybe I'm going to get my daughter back because the media coverage was pretty pertinent and pretty heavy, and even the DA was involved in my case. I'd gone to the DA. I do believe these moms should go to their DAs. I don't care. Try to get it criminally prosecuted. Give it your all. And my DA admitted that he believed my child was being abused. And I said, tell me, like I tell all these moms, get together a big black book, whatever, big binder, lawyer book, and put all your motions in there and all your important information. Don't put a bunch of garbage in there. Just make sure it's really clear. Make sure you're articulate, where you can go in, you can go to an attorney, you can go to a senator or a congressman, you can go to the DA. So I had that book together, and I went to the DA, and I said, come on, Gallagher, tell me you can't prosecute this case. You have 1/10 evidence in other cases, and you're not prosecuting my case. And he said, Maralee, I believe your child is being abused, and if you lose that child, we will step in to do something. That's in the lower courts, the family court, right? They never stepped in, and I lost her right after that. And when I went to court for that last hearing, the judge literally, I could have people, and it's the first time I could have people in the courtroom. The media was outside the door, and it was an 18-page court order, just gag order to pay all child support, all attorney's fees, all court costs. So this is what happens to these mothers. They end up being bankrupt. They bankrupt you to shut you up. They bankrupt you so you cannot continue to fight. So I was ordered to pay everything. and the gag order. And so the media was there, and when I came out, I didn't speak or anything, but they knew what was going on, and I had an attorney at the time. As time goes on, I'm financially bankrupt, and I lost my daughter over the phone, as I told you, coming back from lobbying that day. So I have supervised visits, 1 hour a week for 8 years. Now, I'm watching my daughter suffer tremendously. I'm watching her change to, she's not the same little girl. I mean, I watched her hair fall out, her eyes go into a trance-like state. I couldn't say anything while we were in the supervised visit. She didn't know why we were having to do what we were doing. She wanted to get rid of the guy who was like Nazi-like, you know. I mean, everything we said was written down on a notepad. But anything to do with the abuse, he never wrote down on the notepad. And I'm paying out hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I'm paying all child support costs. I'm paying to see my daughter. I'm paying for everything. And so those visits to me, and I don't know about you, Geerte, and I don't know that part on your case, but those supervised visits, I believe, are the most horrendous, horrific thing any mom and child can go through. Most moms are not making it through those, and they're not staying in those children's lives, maybe financially, or they just can't take it. Because I can remember coming home from those visits, and I just throw myself in her bed and just cry for hours and hours and hours. It just was painful. And to watch her suffer like that and not be able to do anything. So I wired myself on those visits, and I had a lot of information on those visits also. And even with the media coverage and the gag orders and stuff, a little bit later, after many more hearings, CNN contacted me, CNN International News, and wanted me to go on. And I was really afraid because, and like most moms are, you know, you're damned if you do, as I said, and you're damned if you don't. And is this going to get your child home, or are you going to lose her completely? Even you don't want to lose the supervised visits even. And I was at a point where what I did is I'd ask my friends, and they'd say, oh, Maralee, we can't tell you what to do. You know, my God, we can't give you advice on that. And I left it up to God, and I said, God, if you want this to go, let it go. If you don't, close this door. And it went, and it was an incredible piece. And it was an hour-long program, international, with Richard Gardner, another mother that had gone through this with me at the same time. She lived in Dallas-Fort Worth. She was on, and they did a fabulous job. Excuse me. And still, my daughter was forced to be there, but I was in a lot of trouble from that CNN piece because I already had a gag order when I went on. I didn't care anymore. There's a point that you have to realize that I know as a mother, I'm an excellent mother, and I know there was tons of evidence proving my daughter was being abused. She was very articulate and telling exactly what was happening to her. And I don't regret anything I did, and I don't feel that I did anything wrong. And you have your First Amendment rights, and you know, your civil rights are being denied, your humanity rights are being denied. And I want to laugh when I hear all these women out here fighting for equal rights. Are you kidding me? Equal rights? We're not even close when we can't keep our children safe in the courts. If you can't keep your child safe, how do you have rights? I don't care about money. I could care less about money if I couldn't keep my child safe. So I ended up going pro se because I was wiped out. But I honestly believe this. I think a lot of these moms are very educated. I mean, they're from every walk in life. The women I testified before Congress with were attorneys, doctors from every walk of life. It doesn't matter where you're coming from, are very educated. And they're getting more so, and especially with the internet. We didn't have that. We didn't have a way to connect the way they do. And I hear them saying, well, I filed this motion. Did you try that? Has this worked for you? Has that worked for you? So, and I think it's so pertinent to be able to go in there and represent yourself. They say, oh, God, don't do that. I got way more ahead by representing myself. I had a voice. I'm out here having a voice today, nationally and internationally, for other mothers. My passion is here because I can't stand what I see going on. I can't stand what's happening to you. I can't stand what's happening to all these moms and their children. There's nothing worse. I mean, I want to read something to you, and a lot of people know this, but this is Robin Carr. She's a mom that's gone through this. And she said, to lose a child through life, she wrote this poem. It's impossible to know that your child is still okay. To protect your child was your job, so you think you failed in every way. When your child is no longer with you and still so very young, you can't help but think there must have been more you could have done. You turn the music up and sob while you're in your car and the shower hides your tears. You know you can't survive this kind of loss another day, another month, another year. Yet the years go by and you realize you're still alone. Although you did all you knew and could, and your child still did not come home. The child you carried and brought into this world has gone away. There's nothing left to do but pray, pray, and pray. How evil are those who desire nothing more than to destroy the mother-child bond. You continue to seek justice, but the gut-wrenching pain goes on and on. No matter how huge the loss, you have no choice but to start another day without your child that gave your life meaning in every way. I have a hard time getting through it. Anyway, she says, you lie down at night and think of your child and feel so all alone. There's nothing in this world you want more than your child just to come home. And that's how all these women feel. And I just, and these children, I mean, look at the ACE study research, people. Look at what that's doing. Look at the billions of dollars it costs. I don't care about money once again, but the taxpayers, if you don't want to listen to this issue and you don't think it touches you, read the ACE research and see how much it touches your life, how much it touches these children's life, what the illnesses are that they're going to have in their future, what they have to go through to even be whole. And I guess, so the years went on in my case, like I told you, and I ended up going on CNN, and I had the gag order, and I came back to go to jail for the gag order, and I had 5 contempt citations against me because of the media coverage and because of all the organizations I was affiliated with. And back then Janet Reno was doing a meme. We had a memo going to Janet Reno, and she was getting ready to investigate these cases. And so when the judge asked me, who are you affiliated with? Oh man, I gave it to him. I was like, you really want to know? I'm with the National Center for Protected Parents, which is a huge organization that was doing a lot in this. And I really want to give, Joan Pennington was the first guru in all this as an attorney. And she was a battered woman and had been beaten until one eye went black, and then he beat her other eye until she went blind. And she had 5 children and sat on the steps in New Jersey trying to get somebody to help her with her children. This is way back when domestic violence was just first coming out, and even before that. And then when she went to law school and got her law degree, and she started getting calls from mothers like myself, and she thought they were all crazy. And then she realized what was going on, and she's done some really good research, which is in my book, that shows how this is happening. We can go back to paternal. We've got people fighting so many different directions. We've got like Safe Child Act, and there, what is it? Oh,
the Safe Child
International. Yeah, and they're fighting on the paternal side of it. These men are getting custody, and it goes back to the times, and which is true. That's a lot of it. And then you've got people fighting the father's rights side of it, and yeah, that's true too. But that's not the real issue here. I don't believe it's just the money issue. There's more. There's more to this, and
we got the Women's Coalition, right? The Women's Coalition fights.
Yeah, that one, and then there's California Protected Parents Association. We've got several organizations, and I always say we just need to put an umbrella over all of them, and we need to all work together. But my main concern is to get it to the media and get the media involved. And there was one more thing I wanted to share is, like, in my book, as it's that, the emotional part is very hard to read, and I'm getting incredible reviews, and there's people looking at this higher up that may be able to help us. So that's the real reason. And the reason for writing this really was a therapeutic tool for me. In a sense, I started writing just to protect my daughter so she knew what had happened, but it became a therapeutic tool, and then it became a tool to help many, many others. And I just wanted to share with you, people always ask me about her, and there's something that this poem she wrote that I think is incredible. If I can find it, I should have marked it. It's towards the end of my book here. But she writes, oh, darn it, I don't know where it is. I should have marked it. I guess I won't even bring it in.
No, that's okay. In the meantime, while you're looking for that, I'll share the screen again, and I'll show the viewers what the book looks like, where they can find it. You know what? I commend you on being able to write the book. It's not something necessarily I recommend to other protective mothers, because as you write your story, you're reliving the entire nightmare. It can be a way to process your experience, but I would, if you do it, I would recommend having some kind of guidance from a therapist as you work through it, because it's so intense. I mean, even when you're sharing the story today, after all these years, the emotion is so incredible. It's like right there. And right before we started today's show, I was sharing with you how the emotion comes out at the weirdest moments, like when I'm in a store or when I'm standing in line.
Yes, that's what I was relating to when I said that to you, because it is that. You don't know when it's going to hit. Mm-hmm. You know, like I was saying, you have almost a sixth sense to stuff. It hits the weirdest times. I still don't like to go to the grocery store, so that's one place I don't like to go. But I was just going to share this poem. She wrote this when she was like 12 and a half, right when I got her home, 13. And I thought it says a lot. And so she says, I am a dreamer. I'm a dreamer lost in the world of logic and order. I wonder how big the universe really is. I hear the tinkling of fairies everywhere. I see an open ocean filled with mermaids diving in and out of the waves. I am a dreamer lost in the world of logic and order. I pretend to glide in and out of the clouds with a flying unicorn. I feel that when I enter my world, everything is peaceful. I touch the barrier between the dream world and reality, and I worry that someday my special world will collide with the real. I'm a dreamer, lost in the world of logic and order. I understand that my dreams might never come true. I say that my world will last forever. I dream that I'm on a star looking down at the world. I try to keep my two worlds from becoming one. I hope my special world will never end, for it is my salvation from the troubles in life. I'm a dreamer, lost in the world of logic and order. I think it says it all of how she was struggling to get through this and having to survive it. And she had to dissociate to get through it. And I say to the women out there, you know, all the moms that I went through this with are not having such a relationship with their child. And I think it's really important, even though you're in those supervised visits, you can stay in there, stay in there. Now, I know it's different. Every mom's case is different, and some, like yours, just don't even have, you know, father's ran with a child, or he's got complete control and you're ready to go to jail or whatever. But that contact, even though it was an hour a week, was the most painful thing. As I said to you earlier, or somewhere I saw you wrote something I had written. She would say she flies to my house at night and she's on the windowsill and she's always with me. Very important for them to have that connection and that bond. And for the society, or not society, but our courts to be breaking that bond between mother and child, very, very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at my case, I brought up the fact that the father's not allowing any visitation, even though there's a court order, and a judge didn't, you know, hold any consequences to the fact that here's the father breaking her own court orders, and there's no consequences to it. I mean, we know that the fathers, you know, they're psychopaths and narcissists. There's no communicating with someone who's that lost, someone who has a disorder. You can't reach them through regular communication, but you would think that the court system would at some point at least place consequences to them breaking the law. I mean, you know, first of all, how can they not prosecute sexual abuse in criminal courts? I'm right there with you. Why is this even a family court matter? These are crimes against children, crimes against mother, crimes against humanity. These need to be handled in criminal courts. This is also a question I put out in front of, a retired domestic violence attorney, Barry Goldstein. Like, don't you think we should just, you know, abolish family courts, abolish CPS? They're doing the opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. And his answer was, we need to educate the courts and make them understand that parental alienation syndrome is a hoax. But that's already been proven, like you said.
And they're still using it. I think, as I said earlier, I think it goes much deeper than this. And I think that, you know, when you have the evidence and they're not prosecuting those cases, or they're throwing them into family court and the judges are listening to what a GAL says or a social worker says, versus not even having the training on domestic violence, like we were talking, if there's domestic violence, in 70% of cases where there's domestic violence, they know that those cases are contested custody cases. And the reason they are is because usually those guys are abusers. And right here in Colorado, they wanted to pass a law, the 50-50, give 50-50 to the father and the mother. And yeah, that's great, but not if they're an abuser. Yeah, it looks good on paper, but let's look at the abuse side of it. And we fought that like crazy on legislation, and it went from noon until midnight. And the only thing that stopped that from going through was the people testifying, the women coming in and saying, what happened to them.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, I think that's really important, that women don't think that it's okay to have 50-50, because really, if somebody's a really good parent and they really want what's best for that child, they work those relationships out. They make sure those children are okay, and even if the father's the stay-at-home father, they make sure that the relationship works. But if you're in that contested custody mode, I wasn't even in that. They made it into that. But if you're in that, that's not where you want to be, trying to decide how we're going to let this father get in that child's life when he's hurting the child.
Absolutely.
See that anywhere else in the world, that you would be continuing to do that. And I mean, I have a mom that's out of England that just went to prison for several years, and she's not gotten her little girl back, and it's everywhere, as you know. I can't even comprehend. Every time I hear a story or another mom telling me what's going on, and I give advice. I cannot give legal advice, but I give them good advice, what I think how they can handle this a little bit better, or what they can do. But this is a system, there's a systematic problem, and it's failing miserably. And these judges, just to not listen to the abuse issue or not listen to domestic violence, my God. I remember Joan Pennington, the attorney I told you about, that I had a rally with her at the Capitol in Denver, and we had people coming in, mothers coming in from all across the nation, and there were from every state they were there, and there were moms that were running from the FBI. And Joan got on the Capitol steps and she said, first we start taking a list of mothers at the National Center for Protective Parents. And she said, but today we're no longer taking a list of mothers, we're taking a list of those judges. And the first judge on that list is going to be that of Maralee McLean's child, who has sentenced her child to a lifetime of abuse. And then she said, and Judge Michael Bale will be that first judge. And then she goes, and this is for you, Amy, and her fist goes in the air. And the grassroots effort of that rally, to me, domestic violence, she said it took them 20 years to listen to domestic violence. Now you have to imagine, this was 25 years ago. She's saying it took them 20 years to listen to domestic violence. We don't have another 20 years for them to listen to this issue. And it is 20 years later. We don't have time to continue to let children suffer like this. I find it amazing if people say, they have not a clue how damaging this is to all of society. And yet it is a domestic violence issue. Most of these cases are. And if they aren't domestic violence, it's child abuse of the utmost worst kind. And yet we are doing nothing to stop it.
How did you end up getting your daughter back after 8 years?
Well, I think CNN helped me. I do. I think that I really scared them with the CNN thing. And it was such a good program, and they went in on PAS. It's like the only program we have on that. So it's pretty incredible news coverage. And they went after Gardner huge. And they brought in the doctors and police and all the people involved in my case, came on the news. And it was really a good program. And so I think that, and the fact I was never going away, and I had abided by all their rules. No matter what they did to me, I played their game up to the worst. Do you know what that can be? I mean, I can remember I could never bring my daughter home to her own home for supervised visits for probably 4.5 to 5 years. I was in a room 8 by 10 feet, and I could finally bring her home to the house. But before I could bring her home, I had a big painting of her on the wall she was like maybe 2.5, 3. They made me take it off the wall. There could be no pictures larger than a 5 by 7 on the wall of her. I could not answer my door. I could not answer my phone. I had to pay 2 supervisors to be with me, so it was like I was doubling pay, so instead of it being $100 an hour, now it's $240 an hour because I have to pay both people coming in. Sick stuff. I mean, just people would not believe this could go on. And the control issue, the shutting you up. And I didn't shut up. And I think that they knew I was never going to shut up. So I was going to jail the day with CNN. I did hire an attorney for that because I had been representing myself, and I'm pretty sure was going to jail. So I had called, I called CNN, and I told them, I'm going to go to jail. I need you here to back me. I wanted the media there. They knew the media was backing me. I would have been in jail. You guys would have never heard of me. You would have never heard of my book. You would have never had me out here as an activist fighting, speaking the way I do, doing any of the things I've done. I would have been in jail for a long time because there's no more money in my family. I had no more money, and they couldn't silence me because I had heavy-duty media coverage.
So if I was going to share my screen now, how could I find those CNN interviews?
Well, it's an hour-long program. I have it, and I'm waiting to put that out there. I don't think you can get it from CNN. You might be able to. You probably have to call them to get the actual tape. And the 7 news tapes need to be out there too, because I think that it will show precedent of what's going on. Anything that's happening to these women today was happening to me 20-some years ago. So it's very pertinent that those get out there, and that women see that, and that everybody sees that. I'm trying to put it together as a documentary. What I have is I went to DU Law School, and I was trying to get an attorney's help there and get some information. And I told her what was going on. Sometimes these moms, they feel like, nobody believes anything they're saying, so they're a little bit afraid to what they're saying. Are you going to believe me? That eye contact, like, I didn't believe me. So I was telling her my story, and at the end she said, "Maralee, will you come speak to my class?" And I'm like, oh, no, I'm not a speaker. And I was just glad that she believed me, really. And when she asked me to speak for a class, and I said, "Well, how many students?" She said 200. And I said, "Oh, no, I can't do it. She said, "No, Maralee, you'd be great. I want you to speak on PAS." So she got PAS way back then. So it was incredible. And I spoke at that class, and when I got done speaking, I got letters from the law students saying, "You have made a difference in the way I will practice law." And then I never shut up after that.
Wow.
I spoke at one other, it was during Marilyn Vanderbilt Adler, the Miss America, came forward with her abuse and the survivors, and all the survivors were marching here in Colorado. There was about 1,000 of them. And I joined in on that march and spoke at that rally. And when I spoke, because I wasn't a survivor, but I was fighting for my daughter. And it was really powerful. And when I spoke at that, I just remember I had a kind of a soft, nice voice. And then within 6 months with that rally that I did with John Pennington and attorneys coming in and senators, and we had musicians there. It was an incredible grassroots effort. Oh, there was Louise Armstrong from Kiss Daddy Goodnight. She was one of the biggest first feminists, and Gloria Steinem had written a letter. And oh, it was great. Well, anyway, I hadn't planned to speak that day because I was so busy planning that rally, and I was the first one to get up to speak. Joan called me up, and I got ready. I used a speech that I'd used previous at other places. And when I spoke, you would not know that was the same woman that spoke 6 months earlier. That soft voice was now guttural. I could hear myself talking, but it didn't sound like me. It's like God was working through me. That was not me speaking. And I remember this man getting on his knees after I got done speaking. He said, "My God, you can speak. You've got to continue to speak." And I think that's what these mothers need. They need to go for it. They need to not be so afraid, because they're going to do what they do no matter what. Yep. Don't do anything, like don't get the media involved if you have a chance of getting your child back. But once they've taken that child, you need to stop at nothing. I mean nothing. You talk every time you can talk. You get your book out and you show it to people, and you show it to congressmen, or you show it to your church, or you just get your voice out there. Mm-hmm. You need your voices.
Yeah, I put my story on a website, and that's another great way to share the story, Mm-hmm. This is what I also recommend protective mothers to do. And you can change the names, you can leave the last names off if you're worried about retaliation. You can change the name of your child or children on the website, and make sure that when you show screenshots of documents that you block out the names, the kids. You know, this is all possible, and you have the right to do that. And there's if everyone's going to be afraid to speak out, we're not going to get the unity and the mass amount of moms to step forward to create that change. They're just going to continue to do this. But so after the CNN thing happened, you went to jail, but then
No, I didn't have to go to jail. This is
okay.
What happened was my attorney was saying she was trying to get me work release, and I was hitting her going, I don't want work release, because I thought that meant I had to go out on the streets and pick up trash with those orange uniforms on like prisoners do. So I'm like, I don't want work release. And she said, shut up, you're going to jail. I said, I don't want work release. Shut up, you're going to jail. Well, so I got a 30-day jail sentence, but it was reduced. I didn't have to go. So,
Okay.
but I believe what I said to you earlier, I had the media behind me. And so these women that don't, they will be going to jail for a long time. And I wouldn't have gotten out. I know that's what it would have been. But you know what? There's a point where you don't care anymore, because you can't stand there idly by and watch your child suffer and watch the injustice that's going on and the rape of your soul and your heart every day. I mean, even to this day, it is that same gut. No, I always tell the moms when I speak at the Battered Mothers conferences and the one we have in New York or Washington, D.C., and I tell the moms, I said, take a look at the mother sitting next to you. Look at her eyes. I mean, I really look at her eyes, because there's no one that will ever understand that kind of pain but another mother going through it. And you've got to band together, and your voices have to be heard. I mean, as long as we can get out to the media and get this out there, I believe everything's smoldering like under a carpet. Nothing's going to happen until we get out there and speak, until we band together and let people know this is happening. It's crucial.
In the United States, there are like 2 million protective mothers. There's 2 million of us. So, you know, all we need to do is band together and do this and unite. Stop being divided in little protective mama factions. That's not going to help. We have one goal, and it's to get the kids back, get them safe. That's the number one thing. That's the only thing that matters. By many means necessary, you know. So your case, after the CNN interview, your case went back to family court, or how did you end up actually?
Yeah, after the CNN interview, and then I had a federal judge that was a friend of mine. He was a retired judge, and I had been working with him for years. And what I tell moms, another thing I tell them is, don't ever give all your information out, because they can't get it. I mean, I don't care if they're a federal judge, if they're how intelligent they are. People do not get this. You have to give them bits and pieces at a time. If you overwhelm them, they're just like, they can't get it all. It's too much information. Even like when CNN did my story, when you do go to the media, you really have to have like your ducks in a row, but you really have to say bits and pieces at a time, because if you give them too much, they don't get the whole picture. So that's what I did. I fed him pieces of my case and what was happening, and he couldn't believe it, you know. And so when I was pro se, he was helping me with my case. I filed incredible motions. I'm sure they thought, how the heck was I doing that? I had a federal judge helping me. So that was why I was so good. But I think that's really important, is to, you know, and so why I'm trying to remember, gosh, it was so long ago. After CNN aired, and then I went for the gag order, and then I had the jail sentence. And then from that point on, I had baby steps where I got to see my daughter, trying to bring our relationship back together. We never lost our relationship. That was just another ploy for them to extend it out. And I think another part of it was I was getting time with her, but it was not all of a sudden, you know. I got like bits and pieces. They move up to it. And then I got 50%. And the reason I even got 50% is because she went to the judge and spoke that she wanted to be with me. That's real important, that these judges listen to these children, you know. In these cases where judges are sending 16-year-olds to juvenile detention centers, or not listening to the two girls that tell what their dad's done to them when they're older. My daughter was little and was telling people. Now she's 13 and she's going before the judge stating, I want to be with my mom. I got 50%. But see, I still had to go through those next years of her bringing her self-esteem back, making sure my home was nice for her. She had all her friends here, making it a great home life, trying to give her as much as I could of what she'd lost. And, you know, whether it was clothing, whatever made her feel better, you know, I was really working everything I could to get her as healthy and as normal as I could. And she, you know, really thrived during that time. And I think that, but she still had to go back to the abuser. So she was never, ever free of him. And she loves her father to this day. And that's really hard for a lot of people to understand. It's very hard for me to get. But when I wrote my book, and she knew I'd been writing it for 20 years, it took me 20 years to write it. I told her I'm publishing the book, and she says, you go for it. I just won't read it. So we're on two different paths, but, you know, it's a Stockholm syndrome. These children are forced to live with that abuser. They have no other alternative. And abusers aren't, you know, there are good sides to them too. I can't say, you know, I can't say they're good, but I'm saying as for him as a father, he had that fun side and that happy side that she had. I said, I don't get it. I don't get your relationship. And she said, I only remember the good. I never remember the bad. So it's her way of getting through it. And I think that what you have to do as a woman going through this with your child, even though that relationship has to continue, you have to.
So what's the relationship with your daughter right now?
It's great. That's very unusual in these cases. Most of these mothers have no relationship with their child, but she hung on to me and I hung on to her, and we never ever let go. But it was a lot to do with, she's a very strong girl, and I want you to hold hope that you can have that relationship with your child later in life. And we definitely have a great relationship today.
It's amazing that she's gotten through it. So it sounds like she's gotten through it fairly well. Did you get her therapy or aftercare, or what's that
No,
like?
she has not gotten through it well. She's struggled very, very much. She's, you know, she's behind 10 years from where she would have been. She had to struggle to get her degree and get through college. She struggles every day to this day to make it through, but she's an optimist, and I believe she's a true humanitarian, and someday we'll hear from her. She'll set the world on fire. She's got it. She just has had to work very hard to get through everything. She's working today to get through what she's going through. So I keep her separate from all this so she can get through what she needs to get through.
It sounds like her survival mechanism is the ability to dissociate, or the necessity to...
Oh, she had, yeah. She would. I remember talking to a therapist, and they said she'd have never made it had she not done what she had done, because the abuse wasn't only the abuse of her father, it's the abuse of the system, like all these cases. The trauma being taken from your mother is horrific, especially at a young age like that. And the abuse of the system was outrageous. And I think that when we have our talks, a lot of it will come up to that. She's not dealing with the issue with her dad as much as she's dealing with the issue of what the system did.
Yeah. So what did you end up doing besides, I think it's really good that you're outing the people that are involved, the judges. We need to make a wall of shame of these judges and attorneys and guardian ad litem's that facilitate this abuse. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think that there's a woman here in Colorado. Her name's Heidi Ganal, and she started Moms Fight Back of Colorado. It's momsfightback.org. And she's going after lots of different issues, but I'm holding ahead of the child abuse issue in the court cases and where there's domestic violence. We're going to be doing court watching on all these cases. And what it is now we're going to have to, as a society and as moms getting through this, if you have the strength to get out there and continue to fight, we've got to court watch these cases. We have to hold these people accountable. They get by with, you know, the outrageous ex parte hearings, emergency hearings, suppressing evidence. I mean, how do you throw out all the evidence that was in my case? How is that even possible? Mm-hmm. And so it's an accountability thing, yes. And they need to be held, like, I did with my judge. Oh my gosh, I put my judge's name out there. I picketed when they were reelecting him. I went on TV and mentioned his name. I had no problem giving out the information. And my book has every detail of every person involved in my case. So I've got the facts. I've got the truth. I've got what happened. And I think these moms that have the facts, have the truth, need to label these people and get their names out there and show what they're doing.
Yeah, that's what I ended up doing with my website. And, my case is in Marin County Court in California. And it's the worst. Yeah, it's also known as Ground Zero, the pits of hell, or the headquarters of the Illuminati, as I call it. But, there's so many victims in that small little county. And I'm surprised how much fear is these women allow themselves to feel and be controlled by. You know what I mean?
I can understand it, Geerte, though. I mean, you think about it, when they do the things they do, and you're so shocked and so taken back that this is the United States of America and you think you have rights. And when you find out that you do not have any rights and you cannot protect your child, yeah, you become very fearful. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the difference was I had a lot of family helping me, a lot of closeness with my family. I had good friends. I had all that support. That is crucial in these moms getting through this.
Yep.
And it's corrupt and it's criminal activity. It is. I can't say that it's not. You can't possibly ignore all this stuff. There's no way they can continue to ignore what's happening. And if it was just one case, it was just your case, or it was just my case, or it was just one case in Hawaii or somewhere. No, it's not. It's rampant. So obviously we have a huge problem.
Yeah, and when we do band together, that should be creating a cushion of safety, because you're not going to be a single mom just outing these people. You're doing it as a collective group. So this is why it's so important to do it together, I believe. But that's to say, I understand when moms don't want to go to jail. There's a mom right now who's gone to jail for filling in the wrong box in a form in court, and she's they're basically saying it's a felony charge of fraud, and she's in jail for this. So I mean, they can really go after
anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing why these women don't, I mean, I understand the whole reason. I mean, I could have really done some things differently and I did cause scenes, but I didn't cause scenes. I was never out of order or anything like that, but I did have the rally at the Capitol and stuff like that. But that was after I lost my child. But what I think that these women can't be afraid to speak out, because until you do, and until we get to the media on this, even though I did get to the media, I really haven't seen good coverage since my case. I haven't. I mean, where it's really covered and they go into it the way they did my case. And I think it's really important that is covered. We need that media coverage. So if you're not in the middle of this, get that media, go after it, and band together with as many women as you can. And not just on the internet. I mean, this going back and forth on the internet is great, but we need activism in the sense of like rallies. Have rallies in your home state. And when I was saying with Moms Fight Back, what they're doing, I think that's incredible. And I think that when we pull all those court cases together and we do court watching, then those are going to the governor. We're going to ask, why are you not doing anything with these cases? Why are these cases? We've got a case in every county.
Yeah.
Why is this happening?
So social media is one strategy to go after. Have your own website, have regular posts on your blog, and then push the blog posts through Facebook, Twitter, Google+. That's how I do it. But it's not enough. You're right. And in my particular case...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, honey.
Well, what I was going to mention about the court watch, during one of my last hearings, there was a court watch, and a bunch of moms showed up in my support, and then the judge closed, she tossed them all out. She threw them all out of the courtroom and closed the court. Yeah. Nevertheless, still I would recommend for all the moms to show up literally physically at each other's cases. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, my case was always sealed, so I could never have anybody in there to court watch or anything because they sealed it from day one, so that was their way to keep everything isolated. But I think that I court watched a mom's case maybe 6 months ago, and I told her, I said, I hate to tell you this, but you may lose custody and you may end up in supervised visits. And that was one of the hardest things I could do to tell a mom that I was just meeting that this could be what was happening to her. But I wish somebody could have given me a heads up a little bit so I knew where I was going. And I went to her court hearings, and I was trying to tell the attorney certain ways to handle things. And I said, the GAL got up there and said the father should get custody, the social worker, social services attorney, and she actually was beaten by this man. She was a real estate agent. She was, incredible mom, 3-year-old son, and she lost her son. She's never been out of bed since. So I've watched in all these years, and she's done, so you don't realize we're the ones out there speaking, but we don't even have a clue how many are in bed and can't get out of bed. And I saw women go in the underground. I watched them get caught by the FBI and be brought back and put in jail. And I know that was a fear of mine. I didn't want to do anything wrong, so they couldn't say, look, this mom is this. And so, yeah, she's so bad, that's why she lost her child. So I stayed as clean as I could until the very end, and I didn't do anything wrong, but my First Amendment right going on international news. But I believe in that. I believe in that totally. And I'm working every day to get the news to cover these cases. I can't even tell you. I'm working hours and hours and hours trying to get them to cover mom's cases right now where this is going on. And I have several national media contacting me, but they're holding until they get approval legal-wise. But still, it's every mom that's not in the midst of the middle of their case and they've lost their child, hit it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And media that I contacted too, they just they either don't respond or they'll say it's just a custody battle, and it's
I hate that.
Yeah, it's not a custody battle. Yeah, it's criminal. My daughter's getting abused and molested. It's 7 experts are saying it. I got 6 files. What are you talking about? Custody issue? I haven't talked to
custody. You're just trying to protect your child.
Exactly.
Crazy.
And this is the right.
And do you think you would have lost everything, Geerte, and gone through what you went through and the suffering and the pain to fight for custody? Are you kidding me? You think these women are standing up and being ridiculed and torn apart? It's no different than the Salem witch hunt. You are brutally attacked by our courts. And honestly, do you think they're going to spend everything they own and go through this to get back at a husband and it's a court issue? A custody issue? Give me a break.
Yeah, we need someone like Michael Moore to do a documentary to look at the big picture and then to follow several of these cases.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, take the viewer into 1, 2, or 3 of these cases and show the pattern, and then zoom out and show the database that we're building. All these cases are the same, and then have someone like Michael Moore confront these judges, confront senators, Congress members. We want to know what they have to say. I call Amnesty International, I call UNICEF, I call Defense for Children, I call all these organizations, and I say, would you like to be on my TV show? I would like to interview you about what you're doing for protective mothers and their children. And they're like, what do you mean? As if they don't know the topic. It's like, excuse me, this is judicial child trafficking. Let's call it by what it is, and let's go after it. But it seems like the media is in the pockets of the judges, something like that.
Yeah, and it is kind of amazing when people are working in child abuse arenas and do not know this is going on. That just blows my mind too. are they not aware this is going on, and how much hush work is going on out there to keep these cases from being heard?
They must know what's going on. I mean, in my case, there were all these reports, and I submitted it to CPS. They have it all sitting there, and they said to me, oh, it has to happen again before we do something. Why? Why? Why does it have to happen again? It's already happened. It's already been, evidenced here. So why would it have to happen again? She first
and
has
how
to
much is she going to talk when she's lost her mother over it, I mean, my daughter
this is the other thing, because you were mentioning have the children talk to the judge. In my particular case, my daughter talked to the judge, but what's she going to say to this judge? She doesn't know this judge. She has no relationship with that judge, and she's already testified twice in the Hague court that she's been molested, that she's been abused, and these judges have turned her over to her abuser. So why would she go and then tell the truth again to another judge if she has to go home with the perpetrator 5 minutes after the interview?
Absolutely, Geerte. And yeah, they're hushed and they're silenced, and there's nothing worse than silencing a child going through this. They have to have that protection and know there's somebody. I remember my daughter saying to me, "Who are the good people, Mommy? Who are the bad people?" She couldn't understand why nobody was protecting her. She told policemen, doctors, social workers, psychologists, family, friends, therapists, everybody what was happening to her. Why was nobody protecting her? She could not understand it.
Yeah, the same thing with my daughter. She would wake up in the middle of the night and wake me up, and she'd say, "Mom, you're an adult. How come you can't fix this? Adults can fix these things. Why can't you fix it?" And I didn't know, how do you explain this to a 9-year-old? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, this is the problem. So I know I've talked to forensic experts, and they say there's something called a 3118 child sexual abuse investigation. Whatever that investigation is, I am not quite sure, but I do know that when a child reports sexual abuse, they should be removed from that particular parent, which is usually the fathers. And they should be placed in a neutral, safe place where it can be investigated. Why not with mom? That would be, to me, like the first thing that comes to mind. It's bizarre in itself for me to have to do this TV show every week. And think about it. It's like we have to fight for the right to raise our children and to protect them. I mean, what's this about?
Yeah, I that's why I said earlier, I get so upset at all these women fighting for women's rights. And I would say I grew up a feminist. I did. I had 3 older brothers, and I was always really strong-willed or whatever. But I want to say to them, oh, wake up. You're fighting for equal pay. You're fighting for all this equal. You're not even close. If any of those women lost their children the way you and I did and the way these mothers are, they would be going, oh my God, are we in the United States of America? I mean, is this happening here that we can't protect our children? It's happening internationally that women can't protect their children. What does that say? Is that paternal control from way back? That paternal control, or is it education, or is it Father's Rights Act? I mean, like we said, it's all of those things. But to not allow a woman to protect her child, like Robin Carr's poem, there's nothing worse. You just, there's another thing I was going to, I liked was, I don't know if we're close to the end, but.
No, we have another 45 minutes.
We have 45 minutes?
Yeah, we have another 45 minutes.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize. Okay. It feels like we've been going a while.
Well, your story is really intense. I know for myself, when I tell my story, it's kind of like time stops, and you're just like you're re-experiencing that whole intensity. It's just like yeah, it's like going to another space, so to speak, where there is no time, because you just remember all these horrible feelings and all these horrible thoughts. And I still live it every day. But
I know you do. I just, I think it's amazing you're doing what you're doing, considering what you're going through. It's incredible. So you're one of those really strong women, because you couldn't do what you do. And I know it's painful. Like, I have even a hard time saying some of the things I said, because I know it's re-traumatizing you in a sense. And every time a mother tells me her story, even though I know these stories and I know what happens, and it's re-traumatizing in a sense. You're trying to shut yourself down to listen to the trauma in order to help,
Yep.
But it's hard. It's really, really hard.
It's extremely hard to do, but I'm in the same mindset that you are in, whereas this is happening to me and I just can't stay quiet. How can I accept this? My child is living with an identified child molester who is a self-admitted drug addict. How can I not? Would I ever roll over and allow this to happen? I would be out of my mind. That's when I would be out of my mind.
Exactly. And, I always remember thinking that my daughter wasn't even far from me. And I remember the first time I had to give her to him, knowing that he was abusing her, because I thought the system would protect her. And especially after the police reports that had the detailed information of the abuse that they did, I thought there's no way they can ignore that kind of information. And I remember that first night having to give her to him, and just sobbing, because it's like knowing that she's crying out for your help. I mean, she told me, she said, I cried and I wept for you all night long, Mommy, and I threw up in my bed, because she was so devastated with what was happening to her. And even when we were in supervised visits, she would say, I hate the judge. I hate these courts. Don't you hate these people, Mommy? And obviously I can't say anything, but I had that on tape. And then at one point she said to me, she got on the floor, and all I could do for that hour that I was with her, which I tell moms to do if you do have that hour, is you're like a therapist. You're the only therapist she has for that hour. You got to give her as much love as you can give her and let her know you're there. And I know my daughter knew I was fighting like crazy, but she didn't know what I was doing. She just this day doesn't know all the stuff I did. But I looked at her, and she's laying on the floor, and she goes, I can't see you. And I said, you can too, see me. And she goes, no, I can't see you. I just want to die. And, I remember another incident where I wanted to take her to the Nutcracker Ballet, and I could never leave that little 8 by 10 foot room. And she said to me, Mommy, I asked to be able to take her. She says, don't count on it, Mom. They're not going to let us probably go. So don't get excited about it. In other words, she's trying to protect me. Just don't get excited.
She's trying to protect you.
Yeah.
How sweet. Yeah.
And so we go, and at this point she had lost all her hair, and she had beautiful, thick, long hair. And she didn't have any of her nice clothes. I'd given them all to her, but now she's outgrown those. But I did find this one blue sweater that was really long that she wore as a dress, and it had a white Santa on it and a little blue hat with white fur around it that could hide her hair all broken off or whatever, and these little blue gloves with white had bells on the little gloves and white fur around the top, and she looked absolutely darling. And she was back. That self-esteem was back as we were going to the Nutcracker, and the nerd alert guy that's supervising our visits pretends like he's with me going on a date to this Nutcracker deal. And we get in there, and she's just pouncing along because she just knows she looks really cute, and she's happy. It's the first time we've been out of the dungeon prison, and with the Nazi guy, and we get into the theater and to watch the Nutcracker, and she runs to the front, and there's a big wall there, and she gets in there, and she's climbing on the railing, and I said, get off of there, you're going to go off. And I was trying to get to her. And normally when I used to tell her when she's little, she was such a good little girl. If I said, you can't do that, man, she just snapped to and didn't do it. Well, I said, get off there, you're going to get hurt. Because, it was a drop-off. It would have killed her to go off there. And she said, and I said, I'm yelling from across a bunch of people. They don't know what's going on with her, why she's doing what she's doing, and she's jumping on it. And I said, you're going to go off and you will get killed. She goes, so you go with me, you know? So it was like the only thing I could think to do is I said, I yelled across in front of a bunch of people. I wonder what they thought to this day. And I said, you are not my little girl. And she looked at me and she goes, I am too your little girl. I'm the only little girl you'll ever have, and got off the railing. That's how I got her off, you know. So they, you know, they will recover. These children can, they can, but they're so damaged for so many years. It's unbelievable. And the heartache and the not understanding the system and how we don't understand it. Like you said earlier, Geerte, you know, you're an adult and your daughter doesn't understand why you can't do something, you know, and why.
Yeah, she told me at some point, you know, I asked her during one of those nights where she couldn't sleep and she was just crying or waking herself up screaming. You know, I'd say, how are you feeling? Or we'd talk about feelings. She said, Mom, I'm not home. I'm not home anymore. I'm not Jasmine. I'm just a jacket full of anger, and there's nothing behind it anymore. The real Jasmine's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And at that point.
Well, Geerte, that's what they have to do. That's a part of that dissociation. They have to dissociate in order to survive what they're going through. They can't, you know, they know that child within them has died. I mean, I've talked to a lot of survivors, and I just remember my daughter saying to me, when I got her home, she was fighting very hard to bring that other little girl out, who she used to be, and she had been hidden away for a long time. So they are fighting every day. As much as you and I are, they're trying to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the dissociative disorder that she was also diagnosed with. It is a survival mechanism, and she's good at it. So,
and if she wasn't, she wouldn't make it through this. I mean, that's can dissociate. What's different is, as an adult, we really can't do that. The children can.
Yeah, I mean, it's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. Well, we live it. You know, you live it every day. Like what you're saying. I was talking to you earlier about the fact that you live it every day in some ways. Even though I'm through this and been through this, and I'm out here speaking on this issue, every day I'm touched with it in one way or another. Whether it's a memory, like you said, I have flashback memories of certain things, certain areas I don't even want to go. I had a hard time going to schools. I hated going to the grocery store, like we were talking earlier. It's just things that you just can't have it all brought back, and it comes back in waves. And it's probably like that death of a child. In a sense, it's the death of that child you had because they killed that spirit in her, and the system has allowed that spirit to be killed.
Yeah, there was a moment when my daughter was 7 years old, and she came back from a visit, and she said, Mom, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live this life. Why did you ever put me on this planet? And she walked to the kitchen, and she got one of those big kitchen knives, and she just handed it to me. And she said, here, just end it. Yeah.
Yeah, Geerte. I just think of, you know, all the women that are going through this with their children, and the stories I've heard. I had a mother call me from Redding, California the other day, and her case was just incredible, and all of them are horrific, and whether it's a grandmother trying to fight for them, whatever, and it's all the same story. So
all our stories are the same, and that's what's so sickening. And I cannot believe this is a matter of educating judges. These judges know what they're doing. These attorneys know what they're doing, and they will be held accountable in a court of law that is not of this earthly realm, as far as I'm concerned. What I have learned through my experience so far is my faith is incredibly strong. That's where I get my strength from. I believe there is a divine source, and I'm not saying that there's a plan that this is supposed to happen, but what I do believe is that people will be held accountable for their actions and for their words, and for their thoughts. And if they are harmful to others, they will be confronted with the consequences of that.
Right.
That is the faith I hold. And I also believe from the other end that love survives everything. It is the only thing that's eternal in this universe because it is what's created us. And I believe that the love that Jasmine and I have cannot be destroyed by anyone. It cannot be hurt by anyone. That connection is eternal. That is
Right.
the
And that's
most
true. That's
sacred
so
bond.
true.
Yes, it's the most sacred bond. And what I do is I visualize that bond with her. In my mind, I hold her always, like I did when she was a little baby and a toddler and growing up. And I just, in my mind, I visualize that to keep on connecting with her on an energetic level. And that's really important. It's like that kind of visualization is a form of manifesting on an energetic level. And these fathers, they think that they can destroy that sacred mother-daughter bond. They cannot. They can damage the children. They can damage their development. Yes. And, there's a lot of, like you're saying, there's a lot of healing that needs to be done. I'm not quite sure what's going to be in front of me when Jasmine does come home. What kind of path that is. Can you talk a little bit about what type of challenges you encountered once your daughter was returned to your custody?
Well, there was still a lot of control issues going on. So what the father would do is, even though I got her back, he would schedule her ski trip for her to have ski lessons on a Sunday when would be my day with her. Or he would schedule meetings, like school things, always on my time so he could take my time away. There was also lots of threats. And he worked continually at trying to cause that conflict. So it was very difficult for her, just like it is in any of those contested custody cases where the kids have to go back and forth to the parents. She was trying to survive and loving being here, but was having to go back and forth, which was really hard on her, very, very hard on her. And, when she came home, I told her, you see all those files under my desk? That's your case. And when you're ready to deal with it, it's there for you. So I made it a point. I never discussed it with her, never talked about the abuse, because there was nothing I could do. I was going to lose her immediately again. But what I wanted her to know is that that's there for you when you're ready to deal with it. And secondly, my goal at that point in my life was to get her as happy and mentally and stable as I could. So that's what I did. I made everything as normal and as healthy as I could. And we never lost a beat, to be honest with you. It was really very natural going back together. I remember, this is kind of a funny story. We had supervised visits and with that same guy for many, many years. And in the last year or two, I had to go through a mediation with several judges. They did lots of weird stuff in my case. It's all in my book, but they do in all these cases. But this was when it was moving to me getting time with her, so they wanted to delay it even more. And so I go to this, I have her 50% of the time, and we have a supervisor who is the federal judge that was the guy that was helping me in my case. His wife got to be our supervisor, but for her to be able to supervise the visits, they had to go before the judge. And this is a Supreme Court judge. He has to go, a federal court judge, he has to go before a judge that worked under him to be allowed to let his wife supervise my visits. Is that crazy? And so he was shocked that they had to go through that. They had to go sit in her office in chambers. And that's where his wife could supervise my visits. I was such a criminal, I guess. But anyway, the first time we were with her, she let us go into the grocery store alone. And I remember Amy going, wow, we're getting to go to the grocery store alone. And both of us were continually looking over our shoulders. Is somebody going to get us? Are we in trouble? We were scared to death. And the first time we went to Hawaii after we finally got to go on a trip together. And we got first class seats, you know, and it was great because I was working for the airlines at the time. And we both got on the plane going, you sure they're not going to come get us and take us off? Are we okay? You think they're really letting us do this? We were scared. We were very, very scared that it was going to be taken away at any moment. And certain friends of mine that had been really strong in supporting my daughter and I, she was afraid to be around them for fear that the father would see her with them and she would get in trouble. So it was that kind of thing. And my family, oh, that was the hardest part too, because I have a beautiful family. Great mom and dad, and I think that was a lot why I survived the way I did, because people will always ask you, how did you survive it? How did you stay together and not just completely lose it? And I think that was a lot of it. It's because I had great parents and great family, and they were not allowed to see her either, not the grandparents, not any of my sisters or brothers or anyone. So when they got to see her again, that's the damage of that child, not being able to see her grandparents, who she was in daily contact with. Her just ripped from her life, you know. And when I would have, like, the rally that I was having at the Capitol, I had bought her this doll. What are those dolls, the big dolls that...
The American Girl dolls.
Girl doll, yeah. And she'd wanted one forever. And I was having a hard time paying for my supervised visits at the time because I was really out of money because I was being bankrupted. And I said to her... you know, she said, Mom, just go to my bank account, because I made her save all her money, and any European money or anything like that was in this bank. And she was so little that she thought that was lots and lots of money. And so I told her it was for kids in Bosnia or to help other, you know, I was trying to build her to help other children and that kind of thing. So I made her save all that money. And so she said, Mom, I got it. Just go to my piggy bank. There's plenty there to pay everybody. You know? But she, you know, the things that we went through, it was, I can remember being in supervised visits and I couldn't sing songs with her. I mean, like, I would sing, I taught her lots of little songs when she was little, so she loved to sing and dance. And she couldn't even, she wasn't allowed to sing a song or any memories. I couldn't show any pictures of my family. I mean, it was Gestapo-like. It was not anything normal that you could even imagine. They wanted to isolate her completely from everybody that loved her and anybody that knew about the abuse. In other words, shut up, and you've lost everybody you love.
When I still had visitation, Jasmine was not allowed to speak in Dutch with me. She had to basically dismiss half of herself, her maternal side of her family,
yes, exactly.
Her Dutch culture. She's only allowed to speak English, and we were told that we were only allowed to speak about the weather or school and no other topics. So
right.
There are conversations, and her father would stay in the room, and I've recorded these Skype conversations, so everything she says, she's first looking at him before she answers me. It's like this kind of a thing, you know? She's like always in fear and checking, like, oh, is that okay for me to say, right? And it's just like... What must it be like for a child to be placed in a situation like this, where mom is made out to be some criminal, whereas they know they've been abused by dad, and mom tried to protect them, and now mom is the criminal? How can these kids make sense of this insanity is what I wonder. Have you asked your daughter what that was like for her?
Horrible for her. That's probably her hardest mending right now that she's gone through. She's dealing with a lot of stuff, but she said, I'll never forget when they made both of us go through that mediation after I'd gone through all the stuff I'd gone through and all the court cases and then the CNN thing, and I actually was getting her back. I had to go through this mediation thing with her. It was crazy, but she said to me, I thought this was really good. The actual therapist at that point called me while I was at work, and she said that she was going to recant that day. She let me know that ahead of time because the GAL and the father had set this meeting up for her to recant. And I didn't know because I was never allowed to talk to her I would ask her on a supervised visit if I ever got a moment alone with her, are you okay? That was my way of knowing whether she was okay or not. When she would come home from a visit with her dad, sometimes she'd hide under the dining room table and wouldn't come out, and then I would say, are you okay? If she said okay, that meant she was okay. If she didn't, then you knew she'd just been abused, and that's how we dealt with it. At this point, I said to her, the therapist let me know ahead of time that she was going to recant. And I can thank that therapist to this day, because I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't know. I've been going through supervised visits with her. I thought she remembered everything, and she was just holding it all in. And she said to me at that meeting that day, you need to let go of what happened, and don't you want me to come home and be with my kitty? And I'm thinking, whoa, and I'm thinking, why is she saying this? And it took me back, but if I hadn't had that therapist preparing me for her recanting like that, it would have killed me, because of everything I was fighting for and doing for her, even though I understood the recant and where they dissociate like that. I don't think I could have taken that moment the way I did. I was prepared for it before she said it, before she recanted. She said she has a little box in her head, and she only lets little bits and pieces out at a time, because if she ever let all of it out, it would kill her. He does not want to deal with it, and so you have to, as a mother, even though you know the truth and you have all the evidence, you have to let them come to it on their own. You have to back off, even though I'm out here speaking and doing what I'm doing. This is for other mothers. I don't talk about her. I have today, but not what I could be saying, and I won't, because they have to come to it on their own time, and her health is more important. So whenever she comes to this, I go to therapy, and my therapist says, this book will help her tremendously to get through everything. And I know, like, she said incredible things to me, like, thank you, God, Mom, thank you so much for all you did for me. And she knows. And she'll say, and she, one time, her dad put an article in the newspaper that was horrific. And she came home from school, and she said, did you see the paper? And I said, yes, I did. And she said to me, I told my dad he is never, ever to contact you again. He is to leave you alone. And I mean it. Guess what? He never, ever bugged me again, coming from her. So, she's very strong, and she knows, but it's the poem I read to you earlier. She's trying to balance her two worlds, and that's what they have to do. They've got to balance those two worlds, and that's what she's doing, and she's doing a great job of it. And I don't know when this will come out. I don't know if when. It's up to her.
Yeah, we need to, in a sense, also find research that's being done on these children that are now adults, because I have interviewed one child who's now an adult who's been through this, and I also talked to an adult who went through this as a child. And the one that I didn't interview, she told me, she said, I read all the court records when I ran away. I ran away to my mom, and I read all the court records. And it was so clear that my father had been lying and telling all these horrible things about my mom in court that I never wanted to see him again. And she's completely blocked him out of her life. And the other child, who's now an adult, that I interviewed, the other survivor, stated that he was still able to have somewhat of a, shallow relationship with his father. Kind of just, talking football, talking about the games, but nothing to a deep level, because there's just too much resentment there. I don't know how your daughter's doing it. This is why I'm hoping to have more survivors on the show, more children on the show. I actually talked to a child who's 12 years old a couple days ago, who's been abducted to another country, and thank God she is returned now. to her mother, but she was gone for 2 years. And I asked her, like, what was that like to be taken by your dad like that, you know? And she said it was very scary, and I didn't know where it was going, and I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know what to do. And you know, we need the children to have a voice, and I'm hoping that children will come on this show and tell their side of the story. And I'll share my screen with you because I actually there are more and more children who are starting to share their stories on YouTube. And let me see here, I'll share the screen.
Do I need to hit them? Okay.
No, you don't have to do anything. I'm over here on my Free Yasmin from Court Ordered Abduction Facebook page. And if you scroll down over here, this is a video that was shared with me by another protective mom. Help Me Be Heard. This is about children who are going on YouTube and telling their story. You know, they're making these signs and they're holding the signs up, talking about the fact that they are being held hostage by their fathers, and that they're hating it, and why they're hating it, and that they want to go home to mom. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I'm not going to suggest that all children do this, because I don't know what the consequences to that will be when you live with a father who might get violent. But if you somehow can get your story out, if you're a child and you're watching this show right now, if there's a way for you to get your story out by sharing it, put on an anonymous mask, or put a piece of paper in front of your face and speak it in on the mobile phone, the cell phone of a friend of yours, and upload it on YouTube. Because really it's not so much about your name, it is about your experience. We want to hear your experience and share it with the world, because this is what we need to put in front of these judges. This is what we need to put in front of these attorneys. These children are not numbers. These are live human beings with souls. They're going to have children themselves. The abuse that's being done to them is affecting their relationships, their thoughts and feelings about authority figures in their lives. It sets them up for all kinds of psychological and emotional damage that is inflicted to all the people around them as well. This is not only damage that you're doing to the child. It is like throwing a stone into water. Circles of effects of the abuse are expanded, so to speak, generationally. And we need to hold the people accountable that are allowing these fathers to inflict this abuse. We need to give these numbers a face, a voice. So I applaud these children who are brave enough to do this.
But Geerte, I would just want to say, I think that it's really scary for the children to do that, in a sense. I mean, they're not necessarily safe, you know, and I just know that when my daughter would say, I remember when she was really little, and she'd say, "Mommy, are you going to get lost?" And I'd say, "No, I'm not going to get lost." "No, Mommy, are you going to get lost? Are you going to get lost, Mommy?" And I said, "I'm not going to get lost. Why do you think I'm going to get lost?" I realized later, because he told her, "If you continue to talk, you're not going to see your mom again." And he proved that to her. For these kids to come forward, they've got to be safe to come forward. And we can't even possibly imagine what they're going through. I'm not just talking the sexual abuse, the emotional abuse, the other abuses that are going on in that home, if that's going on. And if they come forward, you don't know the repercussions of that. I worry about them. So I like the idea to get this out there, absolutely, and I totally believe it. But I think that moms are going to have to do it, because those children are not safe in those environments. And if they get older and they can speak out, yeah, but while they're young and they have no control unless they're driving, or they can go to somebody that's going to listen to them, a teacher or whatever. But to get on the internet while they're, I don't know, I would worry about that, because I know how dangerous these men can be.
Yep, I agree with you. It's something that you have to be very careful of if you decide to do it. I did run into actually a website that two sisters made. They made a website about their case, and it just says everywhere, like, this is our story, and we want to go home to mom, and we hate living with our dad. And it's like, this is so cool, but it's all anonymous, no one
Oh,
knows.
I see what you're saying. Okay, that's different. I'm misunderstood because, yeah, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they have to be so careful because those guys are controllers. That's the whole reason they're abusing us, because they're controllers. The coercive control that goes on, you don't even know what else can possibly be going on. I know this, that there's a lot I don't know that happened with my daughter, and she's made that very clear to me, that all that I know is absolutely horrific, but I don't even want to know the rest, because it's like there's a lot more, So
Yeah, I'm sure my daughter will eventually also come back with lots of stories that she will not want to share with me to protect me from my
yes,
own feelings, and that's understandable. I can only hope that they find some person they can confide in and share all these stories. 'Cause
that's it. It's just got to be somebody they can confide in, somebody that's going to take it and do something with it besides you, Even with all the information you had, they still didn't listen. So now yours is more like hoping she'll talk to somebody else that will do something.
Yep, exactly. And hoping that somehow she'll find some kind of balance inside herself again, in order to be able to move forward with her life and find some level of trust in other people, or at least not become the same, not use the same tools of coercive control, or copy that coercive control thing from her father. That's also what some of the children display. They can be brainwashed. They can become manipulators themselves. These are other types of results that can come out of the maternal deprivation that's inflicted by these abusive fathers. So there's many different ways in which it can unfold. Time will tell. For me, I am extremely happy that you are through it, that you're past this. And I also think it's important that you mentioned that even though that part is in the past, it's never in the past. So you're still living it every day. I've realized this too. Someone told me the other day, and I said in a conversation, like, I can't wait for this nightmare to be over. And that person said to me, Geerte, this story is never going to be over. It's just going to change. But when she's back,
it's not over. It doesn't get over, but I think, some people, I've had moms where they've just kind of dropped out of sight, or they just don't want to ever look back at this or whatever. I'm not one of those, and it does not get over. It is that depth inside of you that you just really never let go of all the painful things that went on, the horrendous nightmare stuff that they did, and to her and to me and to my family and to everybody that loved her. So there's no ending to that. And as we discussed, the ACE research study, people need to look at that and study that and understand it, of how that affects all these kids and the women that have been abused. Most of these women that were, that had jobs and were doing really well, they didn't make it through this. Lots of them didn't. And even if they were an attorney, I had one woman that was an attorney out in New York that, now this is not the answer to anybody, but saw no avenue to protecting her and her 5-year-old daughter and committed suicide, asphyxiated in the garage. And no, that's not the answer, but drastic measures are being taken to run in the underground. I don't believe that's the answer, because you're brought back by the FBI. I don't believe going to jail is the answer, because then you can't fight for your child. But I believe taking a stand now, because this has been going on for 20 years, this has to get out. And the children are the real sufferers here that have to get through this. And like one thing that you said, Geerte, the love that you have for your daughter and the way you guys are close in that bond is what hangs on. That does hang on. They will do the brainwashing, and I'm surprised that my daughter. I mean, I'm sure there's some things that are brainwashed that went on way back, but today he cannot brainwash her to the degree that he did. He still does, but he really can't. I mean, she knows who I am. She knows what we are, what we have together, and these other kids that are out there surviving this. I wish there was a better way for them to get it out, but I think it's more on a private deal to get to somebody that's really going to help them.
Mm-hmm. I don't think my daughter is brainwashable to a high degree because she's been, we went on the run together, and I asked her opinion and thoughts and feelings about every decision that was taken. I never took any decision without discussing it with her because this is about her life, And so she's been with it every step of the way, and she's seen me fight. And it wasn't just me. It was a team of psychologists and psychiatrists and neurologists and uncles and aunts and friends and classmates. And she knows that there are a lot of people that try to prevent this from happening. And I hope that for her, that enables her to maintain the trust in adults and authority figures too. You know what I mean? Like not all adults betrayed her. There are a lot of them that really stood up for her, the attorneys, you know what I mean? Like here in the Netherlands, we really rallied around her to try and prevent this from happening.
And she was older too, right? When she knows. So she knows. See, you've instilled something into her that she knows how wrong all this is, and she'll never give up. She'll never give up. She knows. When she gets strong enough to get away, and she gets strong enough, she will. She will.
She's waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm not just waiting.
No, you're not. You don't.
No, we're not going to accept any of this coercive control. I like that you call it, that you're comparing it to the Nazi regime. I think it is a form of domestic terrorism. And like I've said before on the show, where is Homeland Security when it comes to domestic terrorists? I don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I personally don't believe that we need to educate judges. I think they are very well aware of what's going on, and I think there's an agenda to allow abusive men to be controlling. They want to keep women in their place. I mean, we're still in the Stone Ages here on planet Earth, and that's what we need to out. That patriarchy, that kind of coercive control. I taught my daughter to think for herself, and I put this out to anyone. And patriarchal control is not only happening by men, by the way. Most of the judges, in my case, were women.
I know, they're the worst.
Yes. I like Madeleine Albright, and I'll quote her. She says, "There's a special place in hell reserved for women who don't help other women." And that's my message to Judge Adams in my case. There's a special place in hell reserved for her, for what she's doing to my daughter and to me. And, she plays an important role in my family, and it's not a pretty one. She will be remembered as such by my entire family and by Jasmine and by Jasmine's children and her children, because the story will never go away. And I will make sure of it. All the people that play a role in the story of my daughter's life and my life will be remembered forever. And if there are other consequences I can hold to it, I will as well. And that is what I believe is an appropriate way to fight it, because whatever happens in courts doesn't seem to have anything to do with reality and human rights and the respect of mothers and children whatsoever. It's all about what men want, and children are their possessions, apparently. And I don't think
Well, I agree with all that and have for a long time. I think that we are in the dark ages as far as that goes. That's why I say we do not have equal rights. And this is a paternal power thing. And these judges, I guess what just shocks me the most is to see all these women judges doing this. I mean, it takes my breath away. They're mothers. How can they possibly, I know they're in a man's role in a man's world, and whatever reason, how can these women judges be doing this? It just blows my mind that they even have the audacity to think that they can take these children from their mothers. Who are they?
Well, we're going to continue to expose them on Hells for Children. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this particular show. I want to thank you for coming on and being courageous and sharing your story. I know it's really hard. It was very emotional for me. I hope it is helpful to other protective mothers who are watching and informative for those who are not aware of what's going on with our global plight. Thank you so much for all your activism, for writing your book, for doing what you do. Thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Thanks. You're welcome.
Thanks to you, Geerte.
You're
wonderful.
Thanks, viewers. Thanks. Bye-bye. And see you next week, everybody. I hope you tune in again for another episode of Hells for Children. Bye-bye.